Are you sure you want to do this, Master Bruce?
I've got to. It's the only way to protect them.
Very well.
We just saw Bruce Wayne, now known to be the masked vigilante Batman, enter his home, refusing to come.
Every time Batman dies in comics. Hi, this is Simon Candlish and welcome to another marvelous video. Superheroes are often deemed as untouchable. It is given that they will always emerge victorious. However, Batman is different. The Dark Knight has been around for a long time, fighting crime in Gotham since 1939. In his many adventures, he has come face to face with various dangerous villains, and while he mostly comes out of the fight unscathed, there have been many times when even Batman has died. Considering that he is still very much alive and kicking today, these tales of Batman's apparent death are rather intriguing. This video will break down the 20 times that Batman was proclaimed or presumed dead, so keep watching. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks, and let's begin. The very first time Batman was declared dead. This particular story is quite clever, and this was also the first time ever that Batman had been declared dead. The story was titled The Death Cheaters of Gotham City, Batman number 72, and was written and illustrated by David Verne Reed, Jim Mooney, and Ira Schnapp. The plot revolves around a bizarre yet intriguing club called the Death Cheaters, where members could only be gained if one had been pronounced dead, only to miraculously come back to life. The members of this club included people who had died via poisoning or struck by lightning and then pronounced dead, only to be resuscitated by medics or simply begin breathing again on their own. Hence, the club was extremely exclusive. However, this story begins during a game when members of the club started to die at the hands of a shadowy killer. At first, Batman and Robin began using their wits to thwart the assassination attempts on each member. However, after consistently having to put a stop to the killer's plans, Batman decided to put an end to it once and for all by catching the killer. Batman suspected that the killer was lurking within the club in plain sight as a member itself. He then made the decision to join the club as Bruce Wayne in order to look into the case and catch the murderer. But since only people who had died and then survived were allowed to join this group, Bruce had to come up with a plan. As part of an elaborate plan, Bruce poisoned himself and a doctor was called by Robin, who declared him legally dead. However, as part of the ruse, he knew that post-ingesting the poison, the person could be revived via artificial respiration or administering CPR. Fortunately, Robin was able to successfully complete his task of bringing Bruce back to life, making him one of the Death Cheaters. This moment was, however, highly tense since even young Grayson was scared for Bruce's life. After all, cheating death is not easy. Batman took this opportunity to infiltrate the club and gather enough information using which he was able to successfully catch the killer in the end. Darkseid slaughtered Batman in Final Crisis. Darkseid and his army stormed Earth in the Final Crisis. Batman confronted Darkseid in issue number 6 by Grant Morrison, J.G. Jones, Marco Rudy, Carlos Pacheco, and Jess Marino in an effort to put a stop to the war. And this is when we see one of the most disheartening scenes that Batman fans has had the horror of witnessing. One of the most shocking moments in Batman's professional career was when he died in Final Crisis. Darkseid's troops seized Batman during the Final Crisis with the goal of utilizing his DNA to produce an army of villainous Batman clones. However, he was able to use the strength of his bat psychological trauma to destroy the embryonic clones and free himself as well. Unfortunately, by this time, all the other superheroes had been eliminated during the fight with Darkseid, leaving only the Dark Knight to deal with one of the most formidable characters in the DC universe. Batman thus confronted Darkseid with the same gun that Darkseid had used to kill his own son, Orion. Fortunately, Batman also had the Radiant Bullet, which could atomize the dangerous foe. This is where things got murky because Batman broke his no-kill policy and shot the round because he had nothing left to lose. The new god repaid the favor by using his Omega Beam to shoot Batman as his radon bullet left its mark on Darkseid's new body. Batman lost his life in a split second, and the next splash page showing the Man of Steel carrying his fallen comrade's dismembered body is among the most horrifying representations of a superhero's death in comics. Dick Grayson then took over the role of the Caped Crusader, while the rest of the world thought Batman had passed away. Batman, however, once more escaped death. It was revealed that instead of killing him, the Omega Sanction had sent him back in time to prehistoric Gotham, where he had become a ticking time bomb. In the short series Return of Bruce Wayne, Bruce makes his triumphant comeback by traveling through time. when the ancient Atlanteans killed the entire Justice League. This story is an absolute bloodbath and takes place in JLA issue number 74. JLA number 74 is an issue of the series JLA Volume 1, published in 2002. After the Justice League discovered the Flash tied up with his legs severed, JLA number 74 opened with an epic battle between the modern-day Justice League and the ancient Atlanteans. The ancients were endowed with several abilities, including telepathy, telekinesis, and command over magical energies. The Atlanteans charged into battle after rejecting Superman's appeal for a negotiation. This forced the superhero team to also get involved in the fight if they ever wanted to make it out alive. The team launched their attack with the intention of freeing their ally, but none of the heroes were successful in their efforts. Each character in the issue was ruthlessly murdered, as the strongest heroes in the world were easily defeated by the ancients. After speeding around the globe and crashing into the Atlantean Plaza, Superman was defeated. Batman and the others were brutally executed, along with the removal of Green Lantern's heart. Interestingly, it was in the story arc that Batman and Wonder Woman shared a passionate kiss. As they stood next to each other, battle-ready, they were simultaneously struck down by the two ancients, known as Tezumak and Gamine. Earlier in the battle, he had also rescued her from being murdered by Sella, an Atlantean warrior woman who lusted for battle and chaos. He used his Batarang to kill her before she could slaughter Wonder Woman. They were still unfortunately killed, but Batman kept saying that it was all part of the plan, signaling that he knew something that the others did not. The sight of Batman's murdered corpse just laying there on the battlefield was quite stomach-churning, so if you're a Batman fan, this would probably break your heart. His words soon turned out to be true, as in the following issue, the JLA made a comeback as zombie versions of themselves. However, magic, time travel, and other mischief allowed them to be revived and put back into fighting shape. Dictator Batman was stabbed to death by Wonder Woman. In the comic novel by Jeff Loeb, Carlos Pacheco, Jess Marino, Laura Martin, and Richard Starkings, Wonder Woman and the Freedom Fighters engaged Batman and Superman in a fight to the death in Superman/Batman number 15. In the Absolute Power storyline starring Superman and Batman, an alternate reality was explored where Batman and Superman were brought up as despots. Due to the schemes of Saturn Queen and the Lightning Lord, Batman and Superman were in complete charge in this reality. Heroes like Wonder Woman organized a rebellion against them because they ruled with an iron fist and killed anybody who stood in their way. Wonder Woman thus created a band of freedom warriors in place of the Justice League, and they attacked Liberty Island. Things quickly became bloody when the Legion of Superheroes, Batman and Superman, entered the conflict. Batman killed Ray by shooting him in the head, while Wonder Woman battled the Cape Crusader. Uncle Sam, who was in possession of Abin Sur's Green Lantern ring, summoned a massive eagle to keep Superman at bay so that he was not able to come to Batman's aid during the battle. Batman attempted to fend off Wonder Woman using every tool at his disposal, but the Amazonian's might was greater, and she easily disposed of him by mortally slashing him with her sword. Superman punched the eagle to bits after witnessing Batman die. The Legion of Supervillains then used teleportation to get into the Watchtower after he pushed Uncle Sam out of the way and retrieved Batman's body. When Lightning Lord ordered Superman to exact retribution, the latter snapped as a result of rage and grief. He then dashed back to Liberty Island and started battering Wonder Woman without showing her any mercy. Diana made a feeble attempt to persuade him to remember that before everything changed, he was a hero underneath it all, but he ignored her as he beat her to the ground. Superman snatched her lasso and used it to strangle her by wrapping it around her neck. This was a particularly violent storyline, and Batman's death seemed to only act as the catalyst for Superman. Ultraman crushed Batman's skull with a deadly punch. Next on our list is one of the most violent deaths Batman has ever met in the comics. Literally, it all gets over in a blink of an eye. It seemed impossible to ever defeat Batman so quickly, but somehow in this storyline, he gets bested like never before. All 52 of the DC Multiverse's various universes were represented in storylines for Countdown to Final Crisis. Batman from Earth 51 met his demise in issue number 13 by Paul Dini, Tony Bernard, Keith Griffin, Tom Derenick, and Wayne Foucher. The Batman of Earth 51 got into a fight he couldn't win in Countdown to Final Crisis number 13. Batman spotted a different iteration of the Joker and decided to battle him as Monarch's army fought the challengers from beyond. He engaged the Joker in battle, but somehow else intervened, someone that he never thought would turn up: Ultraman. Ultraman was the evil version of Superman from an alternate universe. Being a version of Superman, Ultraman was obviously tremendously powerful. When Ultraman noticed Batman attacking the alternate Joker, he flew down and swiftly struck Batman in the back of the skull. Batman was taken completely by surprise and did not have time to react. Being hit by Ultraman was never going to be pleasant, and since Batman had nothing to shield him, his skull became little more than a gooey afterthought for the alternate Man of Steel. Hence, the villainous Superman from Earth 3 punched the Dark Knight in the back of the head, quickly killing him in one of Batman's most gruesome demises yet. The dramatic Batman and Joker death in Batman Endgame. DC Comics released Batman Endgame, a 6-issue comic book plot line starring the superhero Batman in 2014. And this is an iconic comic book story arc. The story, which took place after the events of Batman Eternal, concerns the Joker's reappearance after his hiatus post the 2012 story arc, Death of the Family. According to Snyder and Capullo, the Joker intended to seriously harm Bruce in Endgame, forcing him to face his own death and decide whether or not to stay connected to the family that kept him human. The Joker resolved to kill Bruce personally, since he was furious over his decision to choose his family instead of joining the Clown Prince of Crime. In their iconic final battle, Batman was confronted by the Joker in his cave lair, who then set off bombs he had previously planted inside the space. He and Batman fought, severely hurting one another as the cave started to collapse. Batman administered an immune response blocker to the Joker after determining that he had not actually lived as long as people thought he had, and was instead abusing the Dionysium. The Joker was thrown into the path of a falling stalactite, which broke his back as he tried to attack a restrained Batman. Batman held him back as he desperately attempted to crawl to the healing pool, until the cave roof collapsed and ruined the pool. Accepting their destiny, Batman explained that the Joker was unsuccessful because he protected his comrades from the poison used by the Joker by giving them all small amounts of the drug Dionysium, while Julia received a larger quantity of the drug to treat the widespread disease. As the cave collapsed on them, the Joker and Batman were left lying on the ground. Batman mused, "I'm just going to rest here for a little while with my pal," as they were about to be buried under debris. This one did not show Batman being brutally killed or slaughtered, but there is a certain poignant serenity in the way both archenemies prepared to meet their demise together. Unlike various other instances on the list, this is probably the one that is most hard-hitting, simply because of all the emotions involved. Batman would rather kill himself than be taken prisoner. Superman Red Son is an Elseworlds novel that speculates on what may have happened if young Kal-El had crash-landed into the Soviet Union as opposed to rural Kansas. The plot digs into the nature versus nurture debate by asking if Superman would have been the same superhero as he is now if Jonathan and Martha Kent hadn't raised him. Unexpectedly, he ended up serving as a Soviet Union's propaganda machine spokesperson. Where there is a Superman, there must also be a Batman. In this parallel universe, Batman was also a Russian and was opposed to the Man of Steel because he saw the latter as a danger to humanity. He adopted the persona of a Russian terrorist/freedom fighter in this universe to rebel against Superman's increasingly repressive government. In 1953, the Soviet Union made Superman known to the world. The Cold War arms race turned from nuclear weapons to metahumans as the United States panicked over reports of a superpowered alien under Soviet control. This plot is thoroughly enjoyable since it turns the original comics on its head, coming to the part where Batman dies. As cunning as the original Batman, this one joined forces with LexCorp and the head of the KGB and used Wonder Woman as bait to capture Superman. They took Wonder Woman prisoner and used her as a lure for Superman in an effort to weaken him with rays that mimicked sunlight from the planet where Superman was from. The scheme was successful, but Superman persuaded Wonder Woman to cut her lasso and destroy the generators that were powering the solar-powered lamps. She did, seriously hurting herself in the effort, but the lights went out and Superman regained his abilities. Batman sacrificed himself as a martyr for the cause because he was afraid Superman would lobotomize him and convert him into a robot. Thus, in a complete twist of events, this Russian Batman opted to detonate a suicide bomb, killing himself rather than getting apprehended after their plan to depower Superman had fallen through, although this was quite in line with the behavior of spies and intelligence personnel, so he definitely did what he thought was right at the time. The most sadistic Batman death was at the hands of the Joker. It only makes sense that Batman's mortal enemy is the one to drive him 6 feet under the ground in the most gruesome fashion. In the Emperor Joker plot, at some point, Mr. Mxyzptlk, the fifth-dimensional imp, chose the Joker to test out what a member of the ordinary realm would do with his power. He wanted to give the Joker just 1% of his power, but the crazy clown deceived him into telling him his real identity, so he got 99.99% of Mxyzptlk powers instead. He then used these powers to create a world in 69 seconds that was distorted based on a caricature of himself, with everyone trapped in a cyclical loop. Because of this, the Joker effectively became God and decided to alter reality itself. He consumed the entirety of China in one scene and changed Superman into a dog in another, thus demonstrating his insane abilities. When he did deal with his arch enemy, he didn't just murder him once, instead he repeatedly killed and resurrected Batman in ever more horrifying ways. On one occasion, he cut off the mouth of the Dark Knight and ordered ravenous buzzards, which are large birds of prey, to strip the flesh off his bones. Joker took particular pleasure in enslaving Batman and repeatedly killed him using this newfound power. In Superman number 161 by Jeff Loeb, Ed McGuinness, Cam Smith, the first of these fatalities occurred when Superman discovered Batman's body nailed to the Gotham PD headquarters. Fortunately, after the Emperor Joker was vanquished, Batman managed to survive. So while we do see Batman die multiple times, fans will be relieved to know that he does end up alive at the very end. Joker's commitment to the Caped Crusader, however, once again proved to be his downfall. When Joker realized that it would mean permanently eliminating Batman, his plan to destroy all of reality came to an abrupt halt, since he could not exist without Batman. The Dark Knight's ultimate sacrifice to defeat Steppenwolf. The DC comic superheroes featured in Earth 2 series each have their own distinct origin story and personality traits. In an unexpected move, the book's debut issue featured the deaths of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. While Superman and Wonder Woman died in combat, Batman underwent a terribly painful death. Earth 2, number 1 by James Robinson, Nicholas Scott, Trevor Scott, Alex Sinclair, and Desi Sainty got off to a solid start, filled to the brim with action sequences. Steppenwolf and his army of Demons invaded the entire planet, sparking off a major battle between them and Earth's heroes. They invaded countries and enslaved them, sparking off the Apocalypse War, led by Steppenwolf, their brilliant and charismatic leader. Many soldiers across the world united against them in an effort to fight them off, succeeding in keeping them at bay. However, they were not able to defeat them. Attacking one of the towers that were used to transport the Parademons to Earth, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman made the statement against the invasion. The panels brilliantly lay out the massive war between the Parademons and the three superheroes, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman. With the use of bold colors and graphic picturing of explosions and ruthless killings, the comic shows how they put on a great front against the Parademons. However, they realized that simply fighting was just not enough to drive them back. Thus, Batman attempted to take out the power core as Superman and Wonder Woman died protecting him, but he soon realized that the only way to do so was to cause the core to self-destruct. Batman entered the Parademon control tower covertly after Superman and Wonder Woman were killed during the combat. He warned Earth 2 Robin via radio to keep away from the area and ultimately sacrificed himself by setting off the bomb that killed him as his daughter. Robin looked on in terror, hence unable to escape in time. He ultimately sacrificed himself to cut off the Horde. Did killing Batman cure Joker's insanity one time? It's odd that despite being Batman's most well-known foe, the Joker didn't manage to murder the Dark Knight until the mid-1990s. Batman got captured in an explosive trap devised by the Joker in Legends of the Dark Knight number 65 by J.M. DeMatteis, Joe Stanton, Steve Mitchell, Digital Chameleon, and Willie Schubert. The first of 4 novels is the Going Sane plotline, which is Legends of Dark Knight 65. In it, the Joker eventually killed Batman when a room he set up with explosives blasted and ripped Batman's body to pieces. When the Joker discovered the body, he realized that he'd actually killed his longtime foe, and after a brief moment of shock, the Joker disposed of Batman's body in a river and mused on what to do with his life without his longtime foe. What should the clown of princess of crime do now that Batman is finally out of the way? The Joker was left with no choice except to go back to being sane, as Batman was no longer around to keep a check on his activities, so he had no one to antagonize anymore. The Joker changed his name to Joseph Kerr and convinced himself that he was just a regular worker with a skin ailment. He even experienced love and even got engaged, which was a huge deal considering that many believe that Joker simply was incapable of love, a complete sociopath. This goes on to show that maybe Joker did not have any mental conditions and he was simply evil and wicked just because he wanted to be. Of course, despite the fact that Batman's body sustained several life-threatening wounds, he was not as dead as the Joker thought. Despite Batman's swift comeback in the following issue, the Joker was really inspired to lead a regular life by his apparent demise. As soon as the clown prince of crime found out about Batman's return, this redemption was over. As soon as Batman returned, the original Joker appeared once again, although he was probably happy this way in the end. Thomas Wayne, aka Batman on Earth 2, also sacrificed himself for the greater good. We've seen various people take on the mantle of Batman in various different realities, so it doesn't come as a surprise that in one particular reality, Earth 2, it was Bruce Wayne's father, Thomas Wayne, who was the face behind the Black Mask. This version of Batman 2 sacrificed himself for the greater good, just like Bruce Wayne's Batman has done numerous times. This story takes place in Covenants number 3, and it's titled Time Bomb. It revolves around chaos and destruction caused by Telos, a being created by Brainiac who would help him in bringing about the convergence of the multi-universe, and how Thomas Wayne, the Batman from Earth 2, who is besieged by foes cannot possibly beat, makes a selfless sacrifice to help the other heroes. In the comic, Telos destroyed Kandor and terrorized people as they refused to listen to him and fight other planets for their survival. During this time, a sorcerer called Deimos showed up to warn the survivors of Earth 2 about Brainiac's impending arrival. As Deimos led the other heroes away, Batman chose to stay behind, as he had a sinking feeling that they'd been followed. Soon after, Batman and Dick learned that the guys who followed them were actually the foes of the Batman from the alternate Gotham, and that they'd earlier visited. However, while Thomas was not their Batman, his opponents were just as ready to kill him as they were ready to kill their own version. Unexpectedly, this Batman spurred them on, wanting them to encircle him. He then allowed them to approach him and enabled them to get as close to him as they could, before setting off an explosive device that he had on him, blowing them up along with himself. He was instantaneously killed in the act, along with every villain who was circling him. Notably, it was after having the chance to tell a Bruce from another universe that he was unable to tell him before he passed away in his own Earth 2 reality, after making peace with his granddaughter, that he made his sacrifice. This was a wonderful approach to wrap up the character's narrative and give the normal Bruce Wayne, Batman of the DC Universe, some closure. Thomas Wayne's version of Batman also dies in Flashpoint. When the Flash went back in time using his time travel abilities to save his mother, a crossover event called Flashpoint began in the DC Universe. In this alternate history, Thomas Wayne assumed the role of Batman after his son was brutally murdered. This portrayal of Batman was significantly more brutal. He was one that would kill everyone who stopped in his way, which was the complete opposite of Bruce Wayne's Batman, who functioned with a strict no-kill policy. His mission was not to rid Gotham and the world of crime. Instead, he chose to roam around the multiverse, slaughtering villains in hopes that he would be able to erase the world and eventually bring his dead son back to life. He got involved in the Flashpoint events when Barry Allen stumbled across the Batcave and requested his help to fix the timeline and regain his powers. He agreed since he was intrigued to know more about his son, who was still alive in the alternate dimension. In this story arc, during the battle against a villain known as Professor Zoom, the heroes, including Barry, Batman and Wonder Woman, also recruited Enchantress. However, we all know that Enchantress cannot be trusted, and she eventually betrayed him, as we learn that she was an Amazonian spy the entire time. She attacked him, and as a result, Thomas was fatally injured during a confrontation with the Sorceress in Flashpoint number 5 by Jeff Johns, Andy Kubert, Sandra Hope, and Jesse Delbendang, and did not die immediately, and wrote a letter to his son in the regular time frame as he approached death, because he knew Barry would correct the chronology, fixing the timeline. He then peacefully passed away, accepting his fate. Barry then caught up with Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, and gave him the letter after he was able to restore the timeline to normality. Thomas's kind comments caused him to start crying as soon as he read it. Curious to know what was in it, well, Thomas urged Bruce to put his previous traumas behind him in the letter. It was a lovely, heartfelt remembrance of Bruce and his father's broken bond. A collection of Batman deaths being discussed by his villains. DC began a two-part story arc titled Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader in Batman issue number 686. In the story, Batman had passed away and all of his foes had gathered into a popular watering hole to pay their respects to him, each in their own unique way. Every villain told a story about how they killed the Dark Knight, but they always did it with respect. In fact, everyone starting from the Joker to Harley Quinn and other more minor villains showed up until the room was completely packed. Bruce Wayne, who was not physically present, was watching from another dimension as enemies and supporters alike flooded into a different version of Gotham to make their way to the Dewdrop Inn for Batman's burial. His lone guide for this bizarre experience was an unidentified female who led him through this Gotham City that appeared familiar but was curiously different from the one Bruce was familiar with. She was neither dead nor living. As more and more tourists arrived to pay their respects, his guide exhorted him to continue to observe. There was some sort of dignified serenity in this two-parter, as even the enemies of the Dark Knight seemed to hold immense respect for him. This issue and the one after it was more about discussing Batman after his death. than they were about a specific Batman death. They all had different stories as to how their actions or decisions led to the death of the Dark Knight. Among those who spoke at the funeral and shared their stories were Catwoman and Alfred. All of Batman's old foes and friends' accounts of him conveyed the same lesson. He never wavered, always gave it his all, and was even willing to give his life for what he believed in. It did, however, detail some insane accounts of his death, such as being shot by the Riddler in the face with a pistol or being tied up by Selina Kyle and left to bleed out. The Dark Knight was once brain dead after being electrocuted. The Brave and the Bold number 115 warns readers about the dangers of electricity while providing one of the more bizarre versions of the Batman's death. In The Brave and the Bold number 115 by Bob Haney and Jim Aparo, Batman made an effort to infiltrate the location where he thought the victim was being held captive, as he was investigating an abduction. The building's entrance were nonetheless rigged by a powerful electrical current by the kidnappers, Bugsy Carthart and his crew. Due to this, Batman was sadly rendered brain dead after being electrocuted by a high-voltage window frame. His body was then taken to the lab of Ray Palmer, aka the Atom, in hopes that he would be able to retrieve the Caped Crusader. Ray, who was left by himself with Batman's body, decided to try and assist Batman in solving this last case, so he transformed into the Atom. The Atom then contracted in size and entered Batman's head, stimulating it so that he could take control of Batman's body by watching his actions through a chest-mounted video camera. Despite being awkward and challenging to use, the Atom managed to return Batman to the scene of his accident, and using a combination of Batman's intuition and the Atom's ability, succeeded in rescuing Debbie from her captures. Thus, Batman, with the help of Atom, successfully solved the case. However, after the case was solved, Atom realized that he would have to depart from Batman's body, and in doing so, he would apparently doom the Caped Crusader, since leaving him would return the Dark Knight back into a coma. As luck would have it though, Batman was physically restored thanks to the Atom's forced activity, which caused Batman's brain to return to normal activity. Everyone considered it to be a miracle because they were unaware of the Atom's role. Thus, this was one of the largely Batman being declared brain dead instead of absolutely dying, so the gravity and impact was not as much in comparison to other instances on this list. However, the nature of what happened to his body with the Atom, using it to solve the unsolved case, is what adds to its unique charm. Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns killed Batman briefly. An epic clash between the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel in the streets of Gotham marked the conclusion of Frank Miller's legendary story of an aged Bruce Wayne reclaiming the mantle of Batman. The legendary series The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller gave us a glimpse of a world devoid of superheroes. In the story, Batman had retired along with the rest of them, but Superman was still a covert spy for the US government. The two clashed after Batman reappeared to combat the spreading crime wave throughout Gotham. Batman donned an armored version of his suit in order to get ready for the fight. He didn't confront the Man of Steel though, until he narrowly escaped a nuclear blast next to him. It was only after this that the two of them engaged in battle. Weakened, the two engaged in combat, and due to some clever kryptonite uses, Batman absolutely destroyed Superman. Batman put up a good fight using both his enormous war suits and various strategies he employed to damage his ostensibly unbeatable adversary. However, despite all of those benefits, trying to subdue Superman with a punch was essentially a fruitless endeavor. As their fight intensified, things took a turn, and Batman was severely injured to the point that he was killed. Or was he? Yes, technically, in the final pages of the story, when an old Bruce was still imparting his legendary crime-fighting methods to a new army of Robins, his death was shown to have been somewhat or of a fake-out fighting tactic. We learned that what really happened was that Batman once more resorted to an age-old ingest poison and feigned death. It was a ruse. He faked having a heart attack to make it appear as though he had actually passed away. All of this was done so that Batman could hide out and start preparing an army to carry on his crusade. Getting caught between two electricity-based superhumans almost put an end to the Dark Knight. Batman has shown that he can deflect bullets and endure a beating, but he's never been very adept at withstanding electrocution. He can certainly wear insulation, but his typical attire simply isn't appropriate to withstand large amounts of electrical current. When he faces up against Elmo Galvan in Detective Comics number 644, that was unquestionably the situation. In Chuck Dixon, Tom Lyle, Scott Hanna, Adrian Roy, and John Constanza's Detective Comics, number 644, a villain named Elmo Galvan, who has been using an electrical weapon to assault people, was Batman's primary enemy. However, this was not the first time that the two were engaged in a tussle. Batman had previously apprehended Elmo Buzz Galvan, a thief and a killer, and he was given the death penalty via electric chair. But he survived, developed superhuman abilities, and found retribution against those who witnessed his execution. In this particular storyline, Galvan was eventually apprehended by Batman, but during the struggle, he electrocuted him. However, this was not enough to kill him. A vigilante named the Electrocutioner attacked the Caped Crusader and blasted him with juice strong enough to stop his heart. In a shocking turn of events, Batman's heart did in fact get stopped. He did this because he wanted to be the one to take down Galvan and believed that Batman did not have the power to do so. The next issue revealed that Batman had no pulse. This obviously did not sit well with Robin, who saw Batman being electrocuted and thus sought out the Electrocutioner and demanded that he revive Batman by shocking him using his shock gloves to restart his heart. However, the Electrocutioner refused and was ready to chase after his target when a determined Robin decided to fight the vigilante and forced him into reviving Batman. Robin succeeded in sparring with him and finally, albeit reluctantly, Electrocutioner restarted Batman's heart before running after Galvan. Thus here Batman was caught between life and death, left in a state where thankfully due to Robin's quick thinking he was able to revive and brought back to life. A bullet caused Batman to die briefly. The backdrop of this issue is a Gotham where rumors are circling about Bruce Wayne's wedding to Jezebel Jet. The story for this one unravels as follows. A gang of wannabe Caped Crusaders, literally copies of Batman with red glowing eyes, were causing mayhem around Gotham City in Batman number 672. One of them decided to make their way to Gotham City Police Department in an effort to catch foolproof bat bait. Commissioner Gordon, in an effort to entice the original Batman, as soon as Batman arrived on the scene, he was shot in the chest, but because of his armor, the bullet hardly made contact with his skin. Unfortunately for the Dark Knight, the impact of the injury resulted in a heart attack, or myocardial infarction. Batman fell over and eventually passed out. As he lost consciousness, his mind was forced into a hallucinogenic condition that he seemed to have experienced before. During this time, readers realized that Bruce still had a long mental road ahead of him, even though Batman's heart had stopped and brain death wouldn't happen for another 5 minutes. Fortunately, his old friend Batmite showed up. Of course, he was quickly brought back to life, but his heart did stop, which would have killed most people if they weren't wearing a bat costume. The time when Bill Jensen murdered Batman. In response to a decline in sales of superhero comics, DC debuted updated iterations of classic characters. Earth 2 was the answer. The original heroes were, according to the new canon, truly from a separate reality. DC determined it was time for the original Batman of this Earth 2 to pass away in Adventure Comics, issue number 462 by Joe Stanton, Paul Levitz, Adrian Roy, Dick Giordano, and Ben Oda, called Death of Batman. So yeah, one can really expect the Caped Crusader to be just fine here, considering the writers have quite literally conspired to make this happen. In this narrative, Bruce Wayne was relishing his retirement from beating up unlucky, uninvited individuals by leaping off roofs. He was living his best retired life, but sadly, his happiness was short-lived, as Bill Jensen called him out after he defeated the Justice Society of America. Bill Jensen was Bruce Wayne's adversary from Earth 2. Bruce was then asked to meet him at the top of Gotham Towers shortly after. He came in costume just in time to witness the Flash fall to his death after being pushed by Jensen. Green Lantern, Dr. Fate, and Batman entered the battle. Unfortunately, Jensen had some powerful magical abilities, making him a deadly opponent who could easily defeat the Caped Crusader and his allies. The two of them engaged in an intense fight when Jensen used his magical strike. This magical strike burned Batman's mask, and Jensen discovered Batman's identity as Bruce Wayne. After being identified, Jensen exploded into a supernatural anger that had not been witnessed on this Earth since it was created, devouring both of them. Taking Batman with him, Helena, Batman's daughter, was made to see her father's corpse being torn apart by the mystical energy. The Batman in the Death of Batman story turned out to be the Batman from Earth 2, not the conventional Batman from the usual DC world. Following Crisis on Infinite Earths, a crossover event intended to restore normalcy to the DC universe in 1985, everything was altered, modified, corrected, and dealt with. Batman killed himself when history was tampered with. The gift plot appears in Batman issues 45 through to 47. This three-part series was written by Tony S. Daniel, Tom King, and Tomoe Mori. The time-traveling protagonist, Booster Gold, appeared in this tale. He decided to enlist Batman and Catwoman to go into the past and save a younger Booster Gold. However, things immediately started going wrong after they helped him since the timeline got altered. All fans of sci-fi know that altering timelines only leads to chaos. For Batman's nuptials to Selina Kyle, also known as Catwoman, Booster decided to purchase a very special present. In order to save Bruce's parents and stop their murders, Booster Gold went back in time. However, this had unforeseen implications that made Gotham City worse in the long run. Booster went back in time and modified the past while keeping the Waynes alive, all while hoping that Bruce would still want to return to Catwoman and the DC universe. However, this spoiled Bruce had no interest in going back to the right world and destroyed Skeets, leaving Booster temporarily stranded in this one. Dick Grayson took up the role of Batman in this universe, but without Bruce's leadership, he developed into a violent and homicidal version of the superhero. In this reality, other heroes were shown as well, but they were rapidly overwhelmed by the horrors that Batman had to deal with on a daily basis. This narrative began with Hal Jordan using his ring to murder himself while under the influence of Joker's toxin. It appeared to have reached the point that ruthless Grayson was compelled to kill all heroes who visited Gotham out of concern for what they could do after becoming Jokerized. Many of Batman's formidable adversaries attained new heights of power without Batman intervening in their schemes. In this alternate reality, the Joker not only survived but thrived, inspiring an entire subculture to imitate him and terrorize Gotham. There was speculation that the Penguin took office as President of the United States and had further alienated the country. Ra's al Ghul and his daughter Talia, whose devotion had never wavered, were in charge of much of the Eurasia at the same time. They collaborated with the Joker to finally conquer a divided America. In the meantime, it turned out that Catwoman had completely turned wild in this universe for unexplained reasons. She agreed to aid Booster. As a result of the subsequent mayhem, she, Grayson, the Waynes, and Alfred were all dead. Only after Bruce's angry actions drove Booster back to the divergence point, it permitted the timeline to proceed as it was. However, he later killed himself as he was still torn apart over the anguish of having killed Dick and not being able to save his parents. When Alfred put Batman out of his misery. This storyline is extremely sad in a helpless, apocalyptic way. A variety of DC characters were infected by the anti-life equation during the deceased event, turning them into zombies. Batman battled two of his diseased sidekicks in issue 2, written by Tom Taylor, Trevor Hairsine, Stefano Gaudiano, and Rain Burrido, before being forcibly placed in isolation. In this issue, we start off by seeing Aquaman throwing a bunch of zombies off a boat. As the story progressed and the various heroes went on to find Batman in order to get his guidance, they discovered that Batman also had been infected by the anti-life equation. The burning question was, how did that happen? Well, during their fight, Red Robin and Nightwing infected Bruce, but with the aid of Mr. Freeze's old suit, he was able to slow down the rate of infection and was able to give some guidance and knowledge to the rest of the heroes before the virus started to take away his abilities. However, the suit could protect him for only so long, and Batman slowly turned into a zombie in his dark and lonely Batcave. Once Bruce had fully changed, Alfred shot him to death with a shotgun in a tragic moment. It was a mercy kill which only makes you feel worse for Batman and grieve his death more. It is largely the idea that Batman is also prone to injuries and defeat. It's what makes him a brilliant superhero. He is not an alien or a meta-human. He is simply a human living by a moral code and fighting crime, which makes him susceptible to injuries, since he often comes face to face with superpowered villains. Well, what are your thoughts on Batman's many deaths? Is there one that hit you extra hard and left you feeling incredibly bad for the Dark Knight? Or let us know in the comments below. And of course, if you liked our content, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
This is how it happened.
This is how the Batman died.